Hi, it's Chris Titley, and on today's episode of Scoreboard, the podcast, I'm joined by Paul Gonzalez. Paul, thank you so much for being part of this series.
Thank you, Chris. Great to be here.
Paul, we're on the 26th of March 2025, and yesterday, the 25th of March 2025, was a very important day in the history of Brisbane, whereby we've had a lot of announcements around new stadiums and new infrastructure and a whole lot happening around the Olympic Games, mate. How are you absorbing and soaking it all in?
Oh, look, I think like anything, we knew the Games was here, so it wasn't like, are we going to get them? It was now what does the vision of that Games look like, particularly around stadiums. Outside of stadiums, Australians really care about who's going to cover the costs. That'll be another discussion, and it's about medals. But I think when you look at what was rolled out yesterday, I think there will be a majority, and you're never going to make everyone happy, but the majority. I was really pleased with the outcomes. I think from a vision perspective, it gave a great vision of what the Games is going to be, but it also showed that there's a really commercial focus on what does that legacy value bring back to Queensland. And I think they did an excellent job on that.
Yeah, and Paul, your experience as an Olympian, you want to talk about that, our listeners, and what Olympians should experience when they come to Brisbane in 2032?
Look, I'll be honest with you, from an athlete's perspective, we just want the ability to compete, and we're not really fixated on how big was the arena or how grand was the stage. That all part of, you represent your country. So whether you're playing in front of 5,000 or 50,000, you're still representing Australia, and you still feel the pressures. So from an athlete's perspective, it was about, are we going to be ready as a nation? And to be honest with you, how do we maximize the fact that we're hosting to have the best outcomes? You look at Paris. Paris, measurable against any other games, was our success actually within the Olympics itself. So now the expectations go even higher, like they were in Sydney. They go higher as far as the general public. All of Australia's expectations is like, we need to be successful, not just within our venue planning and development, but also on field. So that's where the pressures will now be with the athletes, is that I need to be prepared to have the best outcome I can for my country.
Yep. And Paul, you've had something to do with the Olympics in your particular sports administration. Do you want to tell the listeners about your involvement?
Yeah, I'm lucky because obviously I was an Olympian in baseball in both 2000 and 2004. And even though we represent Australia in 2000, we felt that we didn't perform to our ability. So we went through a restructure, came back in 2004, and proved that we belong on the international stage. I mean, we beat Team Japan, and if people don't know about the history of Team Japan, they're now ranked number one in the world in all of baseball. So not USA, not Cuba, Team Japan. The highest paid player in the world is Japanese in Otani. So that's the scale that what we achieved. We beat Japan twice. My new role is I sit in a role where I'm general manager of the Australian Baseball League. So we're really part of the pathway program of identifying emerging and current athletes. And obviously the goal now is 28, now that baseball's back into the Olympics. So the ABL's real focus there is how do we maintain this platform to challenge our athletes to the highest level for success. And then with my board position as president of the Queensland Olympic Council is that how do we promote and support the initiatives around Olympism and what it means to Queensland. And we've implemented several programs through the Australian Olympic Council that are now what we consider legacy programs that will help generate more revenue and more opportunities to teach not just the current athletes, but the grassroots athletes about what it means to be an Olympian and Olympism.
And the buy-in from the general public, I mean, yesterday as a Brisbaneite through and through, there was a sense of optimism. There was a sense of like, this is getting real. There was a sense of like, this is something special. For the cynics out there that go, oh, so much money and all this sort of stuff. How do you go about getting the buy-in from the general public?
I think it's like anything. It's like time. It's like when you build it, they will come. I think when people start looking at the real benefits from any venue development, but just not even that, but even with the housing that'll be implemented, the road infrastructure. So there's so many crossover benefits as well. People also forget about the mental benefits and the health benefits. They're sometimes they're overlooked. Is that all of a sudden we're encouraging a new generation about being healthy, not only but physically, but also mentally as well. And those are two big challenges we face in all of Australia. So there are a lot of different benefits that not necessarily tangible around a venue or economic return, but the numbers will be the ultimate tell. So when we're able to host international events in these venues, when we're able to bring interstate visitors to spend money in Queensland, when they start putting out those reports and where there's more investment into our state and not necessarily at the taxpayer's expense, then people start seeing what those benefits are long term. But it will be a long play. There's 7 years of execution. And if they can implement any of those venues prior, people don't understand that we can even initiate a lot of those international investment opportunities by having venues ready to host international events in lead up to 32 and then beyond.
And Paul, just baseball for a second before we get on to talking a little bit about you. Was there a mention yesterday about where it was and the hosting, etc.? Was there some sort of clarity around that?
No, look, baseball is still a question mark. I mean, obviously not just baseball, but softball as well. Softball, the women's softball team is always ranked top 3 in the world. Everyone's still positioning. They will not make a final decision on the balance of what makes up the games until 26. So it's about putting your best feasibility, your best master plan, your legacy plan forward to hopefully you get across the line. And like I said, even with cricket still has to go through the implementation strategy. I love their vision of taking cricket to Mackay. I think you're talking a tier 1 sport that's thriving. So they're going to inherit the legacy facility when they come back. So the new venue will be ready for them. But to take a tier 1 sport into Mackay and showcase cricket to the world, I think is a great outcome for all of cricket as well in sport.
And now you haven't got a 100% Aussie twang, Paul, in your voice, even though you've been here for quite some time. Are you all over the cricket, mate? You know everything about cricket?
I know a lot. I have 2 sons, and my eldest son was a cricket player. So I started to adopt a lot of the cricket ways. And then as a former CEO of Baseball Queensland, we created a partnership with Cricket Australia, and we actually helped develop the second version of the throwing fielding programs. Mike Young, former baseball coach for Australia, was in the initial stages of that throwing fielding program with the Pontine and the Simons and the Hayden Air.
Yep.
They looked at another version. So we came in, we developed a program in consultation with cricket. We told them that we're not a threat to, poach their athletes. I don't think people realize the conversion from athlete to elite level baseball players. It's a long conversion process. So that's not the intent. But if we can share resources, share IP, and work together, then we get positive outcomes. And we were able to do that. So I was involved in that early stages, and we started doing some hitting techniques around 2020. So I'm very familiar with my cricket. I do enjoy it, but I do enjoy sport as a whole.
Yeah, no, the 2020 and the baseball is getting closer and closer together. Maybe with the batters, some of the hitting this year was pretty clean from the Hobart Hurricanes and Mitchell Owen, etc. So maybe watch this space. Paul, your love of baseball has continued through your entire life. I want to go back to your early days about how that love came about.
That's a good question, and this is what is so important that every athlete that's played at a high level, whether it be rugby union, rugby league, cricket, AFL, they start in grassroots. For me, it was a grassroots athlete. I came up through T-ball, little league, played into my junior league. I was fortunate enough because my talents were pretty solid. I went from high school into a collegiate program, and I went from collegiate into pro. And then from pro went into national programs into Australia. So like I said, sport is that unique vehicle that creates opportunity. And I'll tell you a quick story about, my journey, but I'll kind of give it in a higher level of context. There's a young athlete that came out of New South Wales area named Travis Mazzana. He was the number 1 pick last year of the Major League Draft by the Cleveland Guardians. He's a local Aussie kid that just persevered, fell in love with the sport through his family, ended up going to university, and became the number 1 pick in the Major League Draft last year. Now, that just shows that the opportunities are there for all kids. So we've seen the David Nielsen's, the Graham Lloyds, the Balfours of the world, the Liam Hendricks, use baseball as their vehicle for success. So sport gives that to all people, and that's what's so beautiful about it. It can give you an education, and it can create opportunities if you are able to reach the elite levels. But the biggest, for me, the biggest component it does is your relationships on that journey. So everything we do is through relationships, and you never know who you might play with or who might be on your team or who might coach you that might create an opportunity outside of sport. And that's what makes sports so great.
Absolutely. The competitiveness in the US, being in the US, to become a pro and to make it into the major leagues or even the leagues beyond, sort of below that, to become professional. Can you talk about that when you were growing up and right now, how that's sort of, it's just a, unbelievably minority number of people make it to the elite?
Well, it is. And when you look at in the elite level, less than 3% of the athletes that are drafted by Major League Baseball actually make it to the major leagues. So it is a low percentage. And when you look at Olympians, it's less than 1%. So it's 0.0007% become Olympians, and then 0.0003% actually win a medal. So that becomes the elite minority. But it's the journey and the opportunities, and really also the foundation of skill set to manage high performance sport with life, because you still have to persevere in school. You still have to, maintain, your duties around home. For me, it was an opportunity where I grew up in a tough area in Texas, where, you either part of a gang, and we don't really have that context in Australia where we go, what do you mean by gangs? I'm going, well, there's actually gangs that can, particularly in the lower socioeconomic areas, that can pull you into that space, or you can use your sport as your gang to create opportunity. And that's where I put my energies. I said there was an opportunity through my sport to excel, and I set a goal of, I want to play professional baseball. Now, physically, I didn't meet any of the criteria. I wasn't 6'4", 130 kilos, in high school. So, but it was the drive and the perseverance. And that's what makes sport great, is that it kind of gives everyone an opportunity if they have the drive and the will to succeed.
And Paul, who was there a catalyst for that drive? Was it a competitive nature of you? Was it you want to be like someone? Was there a poster on your wall? What was the drive, and how did that come about for you to say, right, I'm just going to give this 100% of a crack?
Wow. Okay, so this is going a little bit deep, but the truth is that I had a support mechanism around my family that believed in me. So even though I was undersized, and let's say I wasn't to the top tier of skills going through Little League and even Junior League going into high school, no one in my family said I couldn't. So that internal self-belief was a huge motivator, because I actually didn't know that I shouldn't succeed, because we unfortunately sometimes live in a society that goes, oh, he's too small, or he's not fast enough, or he's not strong enough. But at the end of the day, those were never questions in my head, because my support mechanism around me always said, you'll achieve whatever you want to achieve. That's a very powerful tool outside of just someone that influences you, is just that network of people around you that elevate you to success, and also elevate you when you're going through tough times. And that's really the key, is how do I persevere in the adversity? Everyone, you and I both, and when we're in our highs and we've got momentum, it's easy. Life's easy. It's how do you persevere when you're at rock bottom and now you've got to pick yourself up and recoup? So I learned that skill set early, is that, life has challenges, but how can you see the opportunity within the challenge?
And sometimes as children, you don't know what you don't know, because you're in an environment of growing up that you're kind of, your parents and your parents' friends are either feeding you information or they're feeding you something, and you're sort of agreeing, right? And sort of getting that resilience at a young age is tricky, but to get that support's unbelievable from your support crew. How have you gone about doing that as a parent and as a dad?
The same. I've never put expectations on either one of my sons as far as, I need you to play professional sport. You need to do this. It was, we supported whatever their passion was and their drive. But I did have one rule, and regardless whether it be cricket, music, or whatever they chose, is that when you start something, you finish it. So we do have a no quit policy in my household, and we always give it 100%. Now, I'm not really worried about whether you got a medal or you got an A or a B or C or D. That doesn't. It's, did you give the effort? Because life is about, your effort and what you learned on that journey. So we've always advocated it's about, you made a commitment, put a process in place for success, and then if this is your real passion, you'll have a roadmap. If it doesn't, at least you can say, I gave it everything I had and it wasn't my journey. But that's still part of your growth. So that's the mindset that we've created for our children. And then in my work profession, we have the same thing. If we set a goal that we want to achieve something, let's say last year, 2 years ago, we said from a baseball perspective, we want to build our own OTT platform. That started with the concept of building it. And then we roadmapped what that would be and then how we could stage that with the resources and the investment that we had at the moment. And now 2 years later, we have an OTT platform. It's got a brand. It's got a following of 52,000 people. And it started with an idea. So, but we mapped that out. We learned from some of our mistakes or some of the challenges. And I always say, use that as a constructive platform, not destructive. Say, hey, we can make some changes there. We'll eliminate that in future. But what it did, we played the long game, not the short game. And so for us, it's about trusting the process and achieve your outcome.
And Paul, you mentioned the word roadmap there, and sometimes things can change along the way. I would imagine when you were growing up as a kid, you wouldn't be doing a podcast here in Brisbane in Australia after playing 2 Olympics for Australia. So things can change. Do you want to give the listeners out there a little bit of an understanding about how you came over here and how you were so successful for representing Australia now?
Look, like you said, I didn't envision this. I mean, you're talking about a very naive American that came over, and the only context that I had of Australia was Crocodile Dundee, the movie, because we're talking 91, 92.
It was probably peak, wasn't it?
Correct. And remember, if it wasn't Encyclopedia Brown, and most listeners go, what was Encyclopedia Brown? They wouldn't have context to that. We have this vehicle called Google and YouTube now,
Yeah.
so and everything else. But even if you go back to COVID, what we're doing now was there was a minority of people that were using these platforms and understood how to leverage them and get messaging out there. So, I remember the first time I had to do a presentation through Zoom or Google or Teams. It was like, how do I get my presentation up and how do I change screens? So I had my creative designer, in the background running the primary screen so I could deliver on the messaging. Now we do it instinctively. So we as a society have evolved through necessity. And now, to me, what's the next version of what we're doing? And let's be real, there's so much that's being done on these type of platforms. It's creating so much opportunity and gets so much messaging out there. For me, it's great because there's so much knowledge being shared. But it's allowing other people that don't have the opportunities to grow. So for my sport in Australia, baseball's considered a second, third tier sport. We can learn so much from other people's failures and successes. And then that way we're not trying to follow a path unknown. So for me, our success in our sport and myself is not trying to reinvent everything. It's looking at what people do well and then looking at where people have failed and going, okay, I've now got a roadmap. And now it increases our opportunity for success with little resources or little money.
Fantastic. My original question, which you may not have interpreted, was how did you get over here to Australia?
Okay. So that's once again baseball, and that's where it's created so much opportunities. I was with the San Diego Padres in '92. I was playing under a manager named Bruce Bochy, who's now managing the Texas Rangers, and he managed the San Francisco Giants. I think he's got 4 rings now, and a great man, just a great leader to play for. San Diego said, we need you to play winter ball to fast track you to the big leagues. And they were going to send me to Mexico. And the Mexico door shut very quickly because it's tough to get into Mexico. And they're like, we need you to play. And they said, we're going to send you to Australia. And in my head, I'm going, they play baseball in Australia? Like I had no concept. And so I got on the plane in Dallas, Fort Worth and ended up going to San Diego. From San Diego, we flew to LA and then LA to Brisbane. And I remember to this day, Brisbane in '92, they didn't even have an airplane where you walked off an aero bridge. It was, you went down the ramp and you were on the tarmac to go and collect your luggage. And I'm like, wow. They played at the RNA Showgrounds. And, when we would train, they would still have the race going around the track. And when cars went out of control, they would go onto the field and leave track marks, on the field. So, but that was the environment. But we used to draw up to 10,000 people per game. It was a novelty in Australia. And we played on makeshift baseball facilities. And so my journey was through San Diego saying, we want you to play winter ball to get more experience. And it created so much opportunities because I met my wife. We now have 2 children, 30 years marriage, and 2 Olympics. So that started with, hey, you need to go play baseball in Brisbane, to where I'm at now.
Wowee. And then the RNA showgrounds might be coming back into fruition with the Olympics as well. The full circle.
Look, I think it's a great utilization of space. And once again, when you look at centralized facilities, and it depends on what the purpose of the oval is, but it's great to see the capital investment in that venue. Right now, they run a very successful event called the ECA, but that's over a period of time. They run a lot of concerts that bring revenue. Now, all of a sudden, creating this sporting precinct opportunity, but more the capital investment around it. The village obviously will be huge. It's centralized. It creates, and then now all of a sudden taking this asset in the heart of Brisbane and bringing it to sporting life is great, and gives it different use as well.
And Paul, the San Diego Padres, you played winter ball in Brisbane. Did you get the phone call and say, mate, you coming back?
Of course. I went back. I went to AA, played under Bochy. We won another championship game series, and then went back to the U.S. Again, went to the Arizona Fall League, played in Mexico, finally went to Mexico, and then I got picked up by the Chicago White Sox, ended up playing with the White Sox for a couple of years. And you mentioned earlier, and before we discussed number 23, my playing jersey for Team Australia. I did get a chance to play with Michael Jordan when he was with the White Sox. So that was a really cool, unique moment. But it also shows you how hard it is to transition to baseball. An elite athlete like Jordan, it was still different movements and different specialized movements that he had to adopt to try to get to the elite levels.
Was he any good?
Look, he's a great athlete. But baseball, the secret to baseball is that they always draft athlete over baseball player at times, because they say we can always teach movement, we can't teach athlete. So to answer your question, his kryptonite was he had long levers. So in hitting, if you extend too much, you really struggle with the ball in the inner half. And when guys are throwing, 150 plus clicks an hour and they're running on your hands and you can't keep your hands inside the baseball, it's really hard to stay inside the ball and keep the ball fair. So they would have always found his kryptonite. But athletically, he was a talented athlete, but long levers didn't really work to his advantage as a batsman.
And living in Chicago in the early 90s with Bulls fever and Michael Jordan fever, how was that? And can you describe it now, looking back at maybe some other athletes would have had those eras, but I think that was pretty monumental.
Look, the one that comes to mind is Bo Jackson, probably the best athlete that I ever seen compete, because he played gridiron and he played baseball at elite levels. Deion Sanders, another one. There was an elite athlete.
Deion. That's right.
So there were a few that were crossover, but there's a lot of athletes that Tony Gwynn was a great hitter for San Diego, was a basketball player. A guy named Dave Winfield played for the Yankees for a long time, played with San Diego. He was a 3-sport athlete, great basketballer, great gridiron player, and great baseballer. So, that's the uniqueness about of American sports, that most athletes will play all three through their high school years, and then they'll decide where they want to specialize when they get into the collegiate programs before pro.
And Paul, coming over to Australia, playing baseball in the early 90s, and being a global game, and a game that Australians, as you mentioned, maybe a tier 3 sport that Australians are not overly familiar with, or play at the grassroots level, or play at schools, etc. How have you found the progress of baseball in Australia per se as a game?
Look, the Australian Baseball League has been probably the biggest testament. We've now got over 40 plus athletes that are Australian that have played in the major leagues. Our current rock star in the major leagues is Liam Hendrick with Boston. He's on about 20 million US a year at the moment. That's current, but you've had the legends of David Nielsen that really pioneered, and Craig Shipley that pioneered that space for the next generation of athletes. But our pathway programs now in Australia have really created more opportunity. So what we've done now is we look at our grassroots programs now and try to feed them into collegiate programs. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a Division One NCAA program. We're even looking at junior college, Division One, NAIA, Division Two type programs. But what it does, it feeds them into a structured program and gives them more repetition, more opportunity, and an education. So the worst thing that's going to happen to our athletes now that we're progressing through the pipeline, if they don't play elite level pro, they have transition skills outside of baseball. And that's a big miss with a lot of Australian sports, is that we feed a young kid into, let's say, a rugby program at an early age. And let's say he doesn't go into university, and let's say that career is cut short because of an injury, or just it's hard to play at that level for a long period of time. The transition skills back into society are really difficult. Whereas if we think that we can create pathways that, create the foundation for these athletes, particularly around tertiary skills or structure, that at least enables them, if they don't reach elite levels or have those opportunities, that they can transition back into society with skills. So, we're really proud of the program through Baseball Australia, and we're seeing a lot of athletes now going into college, but still having the opportunity to sign professional contracts. And if they don't make it the elite level, they still transition back into society with skill sets. And a lot of them end up getting back into baseball and become part of the development process because they do have the structure behind them.
You're touching on the college system in the USA there, the NCAA system, all the colleges around, and then previously they weren't sort of paid, and they still, my understanding is that they have to go to college and you have to do a degree, and now you've got the name, image, likeness, etc. But over here, I think if you're really good at something, you go from high school, you sort of go into the pro league. But over in the US, as you mentioned, you've got this college system where they might come out professional at the end of the day, but they've also studied for 4 years.
Correct.
Is that something that you are replicating here with your pathways, and you think is critically important to these kids who have big dollar signs in front of them, but then, as you mentioned, they're one ACL away from not getting their check?
Correct. Well, look, that is part of Baseball Australia's strategic plan now. And so they are looking at pathway opportunities, particularly in the collegiate systems. It's not a one size fits all, but we're seeing more and more athletes, over 100 plus athletes now that are currently in the collegiate system. But like I said, with Travis Mazzano was one of those kids. So struggled to make a national program, at a certain stage, or make an ABL franchise, and goes, hey, he was drafted, I think, by Detroit, but the figure wasn't enough to entice him to go from high school to pro. And so he goes the collegiate opportunity, and just context, goes in the collegiate program, goes to Oregon, I think it's Oregon State, and number one pick. His signing bonus was $9.875 million US. So he's made a good choice, but he's also got a great foundation. He's highly intelligent. He uses analytics. He uses all the things that he gained from university, and that'll really improve his opportunities for success long-term in his sport. But once again, now his foundation allows him to transition even after sport, and he's got purpose. So, like I said, that is part of the modeling for BA now. That's something that I grew up with because that's the entrenched model in the US. So kids that have, let's say, parents that can't afford university, there's still scholarship opportunities. And then kids that have the financial means, they can still go into collegiate programs and still compete at different levels because there's so much opportunity within the sporting landscape within the university system in America. But once again, it can take someone that's a little bit raw and rough early, and then within 4 years, they can end up signing a pro contract, or they can end up doing law or medicine or going to business management. So, like I said, to me, that's a really good structure, but it's more about, athletes post-career and how they transition with the foundations there as well.
And Paul, you were a very good baseball player in your time and represented your country. What do you think you were good at that made you such a good baseball player? And then what do you tell the kids now that, again, they mightn't be so as strong, but then there's a lot of data around, a lot of scouts looking at just data, I suppose. But what makes a really good baseball player?
Really good question. And now we're trying to really emphasize this to the athletes. It's not all about what you do on field. It's your attitude off field. It's your work ethics, not just in practice, but in your own time. It's how do you develop yourself as a person to acclimate within that team. So when you say that one of my strongest skill sets is I bought into team. So when I competed in the US, I played for 6 minor league teams. In that 6 teams, I think I have 4 rings for championships. For Team Australia, I competed for Australia for 6 or 7 years. I have 3 medals for Australia. Um, so whenever I go into something, I buy into what the team's vision is and what my role is. So when we look at that, individual success is great, but what creates really sustainable opportunities for athletes is, can they acclimate to the team culture? Are they good in the team culture off the field as well? So a lot of people look at their high performance outcomes and say, "Oh, I'm a star. I can act and do what I want." But you actually become toxic to the organization. So the emphasis is that you need to bring in the right attitude, the right work ethics, and be part of the team culture, and you'll have long term success. But not only that, but if that team says we're done with you, there's a lot of teams that want that type of driver within their organization. So it creates more opportunities. Or if you're toxic, then a lot of opportunities will shut and those doors close very quickly. So the lesson is work as hard off the field as you do on.
That's a really good piece of advice, and you've seen some big switching in the NBA recently. Some of the big players have been moving around, and we're not going to say that Luka Doncic is toxic or anything, but the Dallas Mavericks obviously thought they needed a change, and they're settling in quite well with the Lakers. So, and I'm sure the same happens with the baseball world. Now, baseball in Australia, participation rates, grassroots, how are we going? Are we seeing an uptick, seeing neutral, seeing sort of moderate decline? Can you give some numbers on how kids are playing baseball in Australia?
I'd say neutral in the sense of we're not going backwards, and we're having progressive gains, particularly around our women participation. So our women numbers are going across the whole country. Overall participation is always tough. We're competing against AFL, cricket, and all the big codes. Don't have the resources to go into the schools. So what we consider ourselves is boutique. So hence why, if we can help those athletes and for the retention component, which we've been able to retain, we're sitting about 32,000 members in Australia, but we're looking at a higher percentage of those athletes going on into collegiate programs and then having other opportunities outside that. So for us, that's a great success measure. The ABL is now going into its 15th year next year. We've had more private investment in the ABL, which helps all our retention programs, our high performance outcomes, and helps with our emerging talent. But our relationships have increased too. So we've got partnerships with the Korean Baseball Organization, which is the KBO, the Nippon Professional Baseball League, which is the MPB. MLB is a partner with us, as well as the CPBO, which is the Chinese Professional Baseball League. So when you look at that, the 5 giants globally have all partnered with the ABL. So that's a fairly good accolade to say we've had some success based on those partnerships as well.
And in terms of grassroots and kids going out and watching a game, are you seeing some people getting out there and getting the attendance levels up and making a bit of a spectacle for a family?
The last 2 years post-COVID, yes, we had significant gains in attendance and tickets. Our measure is obviously through the ABL, and we track all ticket sales. This year, a slight decline. We attribute weather because we got hit with some fairly hard weather on the East Coast. And the second one is that through what we created through Baseball Plus and now the streaming platforms that other teams use, it's actually kind of hurts us because it cannibalizes people attending, because as the tech evolves, so does the quality of streaming, our production qualities, and our media quality of game qualities improved. So now I can watch the same game at home in the comfort of my home without having to take that drive. So we think that's had an impact on some of the attendance numbers, because our drops are only there's probably a less than a 5 or 10% drop in attendance since the year before. But our production quality has gone up, our media value quality has gone up, and the digital aspect as far as what we do in the creative has gone up too. So once again, that kind of says, well, I can watch it from home as opposed to going live.
It brings up a fascinating memory of mine as a kid when watching cricket on TV, and they said that they would only show the Gabba game in Brisbane if it was a sellout, and on Channel 9. And then there was this point, because they obviously thought that people would just stay home and watch it on TV. So they refused to show it. I think it was Kerry Packer back in the time, and it sort of worked because then they got the sellout. Then they actually showed it on TV, so they got the sellout and So interesting that you say it's cannibalizing. The quality of the TV can cannibalize the live product.
What creates the offset is that once the value of the viewership is higher. And just to give you an example, so I just disclosed to you that the member base of Baseball Australia is about 32,000. In the OTT platform that we built, our member base after 2 years is 52,000. So 75% are domestic, 25% are international. So once again, the commercial values of the teams have increased based on the eyeballs. Stadiums only have a seating capacity max out of probably about 4,500, 4,000 in Melbourne. That's the largest, and Perth sitting about 4,500 as well. Outside of that, most venues wouldn't hold more than 2,000. But the average viewers are about 3,000 unique viewers. So if you do the multiplier, they average about by 3. So it's about 9,000 viewers are watching online. And the viewing time is about an hour and 20 minutes at the moment. So for a 2.5 hour, 3 hour game, we're getting a viewing time of 1 hour and 20 minutes. But the database increased in 2 years to 52,000. Consider our member base is at 32. We're really proud of that. So to answer your question, we are growing, not necessarily all within stadium, but a lot external as well.
Yeah, and then you've got the rise of social media and Instagram, and you can follow players, and you can follow teams, and you can follow leagues. You can be more, as a fan, you can be more connected. Has that helped you as well a little bit?
Definitely from a commercial perspective, because now it opens up conversations when you're talking about potential partners of what your leverage and how many eyeballs are watching your game. The real opportunities for us is that how do we leverage that the Asian market in particular, because everyone's now going, how do I find ways to leverage opportunities within Asia? Now, when you're partnered with Japan, Korea, and Taiwan, there's huge scope there as well. So now it's about our focus is now on leveraging Asia and our partners there. Like I said, we think we'll continue to grow organically within Australia as we get more awareness. But considering we're not on mainstream, we're on an OTT streaming platform that we've built ourselves, built our own app. We're really proud of what we achieved. And obviously our goal moving forward is 100,000 domestic, and then see what we can get into as far as the international opportunities.
And the franchises, are they privately owned, or have they got some private equity money? I just saw a recent transaction with the Jack Jumpers in the NBL being acquired by private equity.
Ours is a different structure. They're under a license agreement. So each team signs a license agreement where they own the commercial rights of their team. The governing body is still Baseball Australia, who oversees the ABL. So that really protects grassroots initiatives and as well as high performance initiatives as well, and doesn't become totally commercial. But through that private investment, it allows for more leverage for opportunities for capital investment into facilities, and then allows them to drive their own commercial outcomes within their markets. So far, so good. Some teams have really capitalized. Other teams are looking at more high performance benefits. Depends on what their goals are. But as long as they work within the governance structure of the ABL model.
And Paul, baseball has been such a big part of your life on and off the field. When you try not to think about baseball, what floats your boat? What's the secret hobby that some people might not know about?
Well, I've got a couple of passions. I love golf. So when I do get a chance to have a hit in golf, I do enjoy opportunities there. Family-wise, I told you I was involved in cricket because my son, and then my youngest son is a muso. So lately it's been taking him to Battle of the Band events all through Brisbane and watching him develop as an artist. So that's been fun. And obviously my relationships in the US are still there through family. But look, I sit on the two boards. I sit on the Queensland Olympic Council board, and then I sit on the Queensland Sports Foundation, where we help athletes achieve their goals. So we're involved in a number of different sports, not just baseball, about, how do we help athletes achieve their goals and follow their dreams.
And in some of the sports, it's very expensive for athletes because there's not a big pot of gold at the end. And you sit on that board. You talked about the Sports Foundation, particularly when there's equipment involved, there's travel involved, and maybe there's prize money as opposed to salaries, etc. Is there a problem there? Is there something we can do to solve that? And how are we going about solving that?
The biggest thing is solving is being aware. So there's now a bigger awareness now. They've done several shows now talking about, what Olympic athletes generate. I think they're most athletes on the whole, they're under the financial about 30, 40 grand a year to compete and live. As an athlete, these are the personal sacrifices you commit to for high performance success. But it doesn't happen. And I mentioned earlier, you said what was the motivator was my family support. So it's usually community, family support around those athletes to help them achieve their dreams. But now there's more awareness to corporates as well as government to how do we fill those gaps. But the main thing is we need athletes also to understand their role, and in their downtime is how can you create more for you. So it's about the education process about how do they leverage opportunities outside of just their sport, and maybe they have other things that they have to dive into to invest in themselves. So like I said, there's multiple answers to your question. One, there's corporate opportunities, there's community support, there's state, there's federal. But then also athletes need to take their own initiative and go, how do I invest in me?
And speaking of me being you, I run a little question called the Scoreboard moment, which is a moment in your life where it's really sort of like a photo memory of something that happened to you or something at a particular time which you think has changed your life, has altered your life, or become a little bit who you are. What's your Scoreboard moment, Paul?
Wow. So I think this applies to everyone, even yourself, me, every day. It's you've got to really set what your goal is, and that creates that pathway. When you meander through life and you go, oh, I'll work it out when I get there. I've always advocated, even to my kids, what's that dream that you have that you feel like it's not even achievable, but that starts the process on the journey, and it might take you down another road. So for me, as a young athlete, it was I want to play professional baseball. And that started that journey, and that created my opportunities where at 17, I represented Team USA. Now, where I started was in a little gang neighborhood where, like I said, most of the kids I played with were gang members. And when I tell this story to people, like, I can't understand that. So some of my teammates are not even on this planet anymore, or they're in jail. That was where I grew up. And next thing you know, I'm playing for Team USA at 17 years old, and I'm competing for a gold medal against Cuba. Then I'm in a collegiate program in a Division I school. And so what it does, it goes, everything is achievable if you believe in it. And then I'm signed in the 10th round by the San Diego Padres. And I play 4 years in their system, 2 years with the White Sox system. In a year's time, I'm in Italy, playing in Italy. In another year's time, I'm playing in Japan, in Kobe, for the Oryx Blue Wave. And then 2 years later, I'm representing Australia for 2 Olympics, and I end up playing in Taiwan for a period of time. That was my journey, and it started off as a little kid in the classroom saying, one day I'm going to play professional baseball. So it's setting that goal, even though it was a stretch goal, and then just putting in the work and setting up processes to help me achieve my goals. And look, somebody said, do you have any regrets? And I said, no. I said, everything was a gift, gave me opportunities. I've met great relationships. I've got friends that live in Italy. I have friends that live in Japan, Taiwan, all over the world. And now this great thing called Facebook and LinkedIn helps me stay connected with those individuals and maintain those relationships around the world.
Paul, that's a fantastic way to finish the podcast. Just a tremendous journey that sport has given you, that baseball's given you, and yourself, and making your own luck and having that goal and that vision. Sometimes that goal is very difficult to kind of get in people's heads. I mean, there's a big, hairy, audacious goal, but then there's also 6-month goals, etc. So it's really good advice. And thank you so much for being on the Scoreboard podcast to give us a bit of an understanding about your background, your love for baseball as a kid growing up in Texas to where you are now, talking about the Brisbane Olympics, getting excited about 2032, getting excited about baseball and sport in general, and helping people through that baseball journey, as well as you mentioned some other things that you're involved with in terms of helping high-performing athletes and athletes be themselves. Look forward to following your progress, and thank you so much, and looking forward to catching up.
No worries. Thank you. Appreciate the time.